Well, it's time now to discuss the week in federal politics with three MPs from the different parties. Stephen McKinnon is a Liberal MP for the Quebec riding of Gatineau. Karen Vecchio is a Conservative MP for the Ontario riding of Elgin, Middlesex, London. And Murray Rankin is the NDP member for Victoria. All three of you, welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Let's start with, well, all three of you have been watching as the Senate this week. A lot of eyes were on the Senate as it started to pass amendments to the government's bill, the Bill C-14, on medical assistance in dying. Stephen McKinnon, what do you make of it? There's at least one major amendment that's been tabled and one or two others by the Senate. What do you make of it all?
Well, to reiterate, I continue to believe the government has struck the right balance in this essentially new area of public policy, an area of public policy that everyone brings their morals and their values to, and we've had a healthy debate, although a difficult one in the House of Commons. They're going through the same thing in the Senate. The government continues to believe that we've struck the correct balance in this emerging area of public policy, in an area of public policy where personal values are at stake, and we will wait to see how things unfold in the Senate, and then obviously make decisions as a consequence of that.
Okay, I guess the question that everyone has, though, is we've been listening to the two ministers involved, and is the government open to amendments from the Senate, or is it basically a non-starter?
Well, look, I think both ministers have indicated that they're quite prepared to entertain constructive suggestions or amendments from the Senate. I think they've also stated very clearly their philosophy when it comes to this bill, and spoke of the balance that we've tried to construct between those who would like, sort of an all-out approach to this, and those who would like to restrain the right to medically assisted death. Again, we think the government's gone pretty straight down the middle here, respected the Supreme Court decision, and while we're open to constructive discussions and entertaining constructive suggestions from the Senate, those are the kinds of principles that we're going to continue to uphold.
Okay, Karen Vecchio, what do you make of, I mean, this was a free vote in the House of Commons and the bill's gone to the Senate. What do you make of what's happening in the Senate?
You know, I totally agree with the fact that it is being debated in there, and the fact that it's really important that we do listen to some of these amendments that are coming through. I know as myself, as a member of Parliament, speaking on behalf of my constituents, I voted in favor of this bill, but I am waiting to hear back what these amendments are going to look like and whether we'll be proceeding with voting that, or whether I'll be proceeding voting in favor or not in favor of this bill with these amendments. You know, it's a really important part of it. You know, when I put it forward, there were things like the physician conscience that I was very concerned with, things like mature minors and those with mental illness. Those things are very concerning to myself. Now, I recognize that Murray will have an opposing opinion to that, but this is what this is all about. When it is democracy, it is about having our own thoughts and our own moral code, along with our constituents' voices being heard on this.
Okay, Murray Rankin, your position on this, I think I know what you're going to say about the Senate resolutions.
Well, essentially, I don't agree with Stephen's characterization of what we're doing. He claims this is a public policy issue and we can find some middle ground. It's not what this is about. This is about implementing a unanimous Supreme Court decision. We've had people come to the Senate and to the House and other places who are the leading constitutional scholars in our country, the bar associations and others, that say this is not constitutional. Why, for the life of me, I cannot understand the government is proceeding in the face of that kind of opinion that's overwhelming, that we're not protecting the people who won the case that got us here, namely people who aren't end of life. It doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
I can't get it.
So by that, then, in a nutshell, I mean, I can presume then that you would support the resolution, the amendment that has been tabled by the Senate, and that is to widen eligibility, to return the language in Bill C-14 to exactly what the Supreme Court used as language, and it would widen accessibility to people.
I hope that we have another opportunity for the government to do it right this time and to implement the decision, rather than pretending that somehow they're finding some nice middle Goldilocks position between too much, too little, just right. It's not what this is about at all.
Okay, well, we'll see. I mean, it will be interesting because you will all be seized with whatever comes from the Senate. I want to change gears because this is the other big subject this week that's dominated a lot of question period. Jet fighters. Stephen McKinnon, there are reports that the government is poised to announce that it's ready to buy Super Hornet fighters. and to put off any decision on F-35s. What can you tell us about where your government is at when it comes to replacing our old fighters?
Well, look, let's remember that decades ago, the government of Pierre Trudeau bought 138 CF-18s. We are down to 77 now, 27 in Bagotville, 50 in Cold Lake, Alberta. We have international commitments. We have NORAD commitments. We have certainly domestic surveillance commitments that we have to meet. The government has projected, even though we are working to extend the life of the planes that we have currently, and we will be doing so up to, I think, 2025, the government has identified that we will be straining to meet all of our international and domestic commitments by sometime in the next decade. So it's pretty clear that if, as we do, as the government, wish to give our forces the best available equipment and the kind of equipment that can do the job, that some decisions will have to be made. The government has not made those decisions yet. I see there is all sorts of speculation about this, but it seems pretty clear that the government must act if we are to avoid this capability gap where Canada would not be able to fulfill the kinds of missions that it's called upon. I see more speculation today about Eastern Europe. Obviously, we had planes serving in Iraq under the previous government. We have NORAD responsibilities. We have other responsibilities here domestically in Canada. So we need to avoid this capability gap, and I think the government's acting to avoid it, and I think doing so very responsibly.
Okay, Karen Vecchio, what do you make of this whole idea, the whole issue of jet fighters? The government's now citing a capability gap that would happen before we could get F-35 fighters, allegedly. What do you make of where things are going?
You know, I believe that more if they said the capability gap had something to do with ISIS, the fact that we have pulled out our jet fighters. So I think, yes, we have this capability gap, as they might say, but the fact is we don't even fly in ISIS right now. So those are big concerns that I have. But when it comes to this capability gap, if we're going to talk about that, I believe that this is a terminology that the Liberal government is using. We have heard from different people in the defence and Canadian Armed Forces that we should either go right now for a full, go ahead and let's not just do a single source as they have done here, as it's been reported by media. We have not heard from the minister being very clear on this, but if we're going to go out there, let's have a fair process and make sure that we hear from everybody and make sure that if we're doing this, we're doing it properly, making sure that our Canadian Armed Forces are being taken care of. Those are lots of concerns that we have, but I believe this entire idea of the capability gap is the capability gap of our minister making a decision.
Okay, Murray Rankin, what do you make of this latest incarnation of the very long debate about jet fighters?
I agree with Karen. The minister's not been clear. What I think is clear, in answer to a question from an NDP member in committee, an official of National Defence said there's lots of time to do a full public process for procurement, and whether it's Super Hornets or F-35s, I haven't got a clue what the best would be, but the fact is it's going to save taxpayers money. It's been proven over and over again when you have that public process, better transparency and accountability, and Canadians that are serving proudly for this country need that kind of guarantee that the stuff we're getting is actually going to do the job and at reasonable cost. That I want to insist on, a public procurement process, not a sole source contract.
Okay, Stephen McKinnon, I know none of us are experts in military materiel and how to run a jet fighter, but we were told by senior Air Force people that the F-18s would last until 2025 if a refit was done. The refit we've now learned has not started yet. It was announced in 2014. It's supposed to be done next year. So are we looking at maybe the government deciding not to do a refit and to quickly buy some Super Hornets? That's the rumor.
Well, look, you see the kinds of timelines involved in these things, and that's why the government, as it looks out into the next decade, has identified this capability gap that we're discussing, where we only have 77 planes, where we strain already, I think, to make sure that we are able to fulfill all of our obligations and all of the needs for those aircraft. And so I think the government is very prudently and very responsibly deliberating as we speak as to what is the appropriate way to give our forces, our Air Force and our men and women in uniform the best possible equipment and have Canada be able to to fulfill its international obligations as we move into the next decade. Again, I expect that the government will be announcing its intentions on this front, in due course.
Okay, quick question. Do you think they'll announce the intentions before the House rises for the summer?
Well, I don't want to speculate on dates. I know that we're trying to get a lot. We talked about C-14. There are an awful lot of issues that we're trying to get a budget passed in here today. We have all sorts of other measures on our plates, so I don't want to speculate as to timing, but I know that this is something the government's seized with.
Okay, well, on that note, we are running out of time, but I want to thank all three of you. I want to wish you a good weekend in your ridings, and thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.